Unless you do this, your business is at risk. Now, you might think that running a small business is great and it's cool. You're doing something on your own time, on your own terms, and you're generally having a good time, pretty well 80% of the time in your business. And that's great. However, it is easy to get very comfortable in what you're doing. Look, I once did some consulting for a client, and when I walked into his office and quoted him my prices for working with him to help him out, he didn't flinch. And I thought, oh, maybe I charged too cheap. Anyway, not too long after I'd started working with him, then I suddenly realised why he was so cool and so casual when I quoted him my figures. It turns out he had a very good, solid um, employment recruitment business. And but there was probably one thing that stood out the most. This was that one client took up 70% of his turnover. Just one client took up, a very large chunk of his business. Now, I was obviously working on that other 30% that was left over and working on building that to some degree. But I didn't realize that the 70% probably made him a bit too relaxed. And it wasn't until at least a couple of years later down the track after I'd left working with him that I suddenly realized just how much vulnerability that his business was actually placed under. As it turned out, he did have one or two good strikes and good fortunes, but there was a couple of times there where the business that he was, supplying most of his work to could have upped and walked away and gone somewhere else completely different. And if that was the case, not only his lifestyle, the office where he was renting, uh, a large portion of the staff that he had, they would have been told to walk out the door. He would have had to pick up shop and move to a much, much smaller office, just like that. That's how close things became. He was lucky. Another company bought him out, not the client, but that could have happened. You never know. But it highlighted one thing to me, and I thought to myself, yeah, if you are a little bit overinvested in one client, then you're virtually an employee for that client. No two ways about it. And a lot of small businesses can coast along quite comfortably where they are and then get into that false sense of security because they're invested in one form of bringing in new customers. Now, I'm not saying you have to diversify right across the board with lots of different products that you're selling. That may not necessarily be the case. But you do need to invest in diversity of the income streams and the types of clients that you bring in if you want to have a risk-free type of environment or lower the risk that you have where you're invested in just one form of getting your customers. I mean, like for example, with the cafe that I was with a number of years ago, if we relied entirely upon the foot traffic that went past the front door, if there was any problem with the public transport system or, bad weather or any of those other different things, our numbers would go up and down like a yo-yo. But luckily, I had invested in having a website for the business. We did have one or two clients in the catering area. I decided to expand the catering customer base. So we worked on a few different angles there to bring in new customers. I even stood out on the street and handed out brochures and went to see local businesses in the area. But you do need to make sure that you've got a diversity of ways to bring in your customers so you're not heavily reliant upon just one single channel for that customer acquisition. If you are, then of course you're vulnerable. And if they say that there's any kind of failure rate in business, a lot of businesses are very successful. They're inherently very resilient. And it's not because of what they're doing is wrong, it's the reliance upon doing things in only one particular way, and particularly in your marketing channels, relying upon only one particular input for where your new customers come from, or the different types of customer base that you're dealing with. There may be other ways that you can attack it or tackle it. I mean, even just down the road here, not far away from where I am in Military Road, I spotted a restaurant that had opened up a local cafe nearby. Now, they didn't actually take over somebody else's cafe. They took over a little tiny hole on the wall, as I would call it. That's one of the terms you might hear in Australia, a little hole on the wall that we would call it in retail terms. And then they fitted it out with all new equipment. And when I saw the name appear on that cafe, then I thought, right, that's, a variation on the name of the restaurant just, a couple of doors up the road from it. I thought, ta-da, okay. So what have they actually done there? They've diversified. They can get catering customers just from that cafe because the restaurant that they own further up the road, that's only open after 5 o'clock or after 4:30 at least. But the cafe is open at least, from 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning, whatever you like. It's open a lot earlier in the day, so they can attract a customer base across a broader range there, and then advertise what they're doing in their restaurant a couple of doors up the road, which is open at a bit of a later time slot. So once again, it's an idea of saying, let's look at your business. Let's look at where the opportunities are in your business and ask yourself, am I diversified? If something goes wrong with my current acquisition of clients coming in, do I have other alternatives for bringing in clients? And also, am I overinvested in maybe one or two clients or one or two particular types of businesses? This can even happen in cafes and so forth as well, yes. But it can happen in businesses in general. If you're running an art design studio or a printing business or a web design business, if you're getting too many customers coming in from just one particular direction, it's easy to get lazy and do nothing about it because it's easy to coast. You're going along, you're skating along, you're just enjoying yourself, and that can lead to a potential brick wall if you're not aware of any potential risks that may happen because of any variation that happens with acquiring customers that way. So all I'm saying here is look at the alternatives, de-risk your business, and then take yourself out of what you're doing there so that in case something does go wrong with the client acquisition that you've currently got, or your clients get up and walk and go somewhere else, you've got another channel for bringing in customers to replace them or diversify your income opportunities. So you've got several different channels there of income streams coming into your business. This is David Newton speaking. Let me know in the comments if you've got any ideas there that could work well with your business that you'd like to share with everybody else.